They had conquered 800 worlds. They had done this for 3,000 years and they had never failed, not once. Their method was simple and clean. They would find a young planet with life. They would surround it with warships. They would tell the species below to surrender. And every single time, the species would fall to their knees and beg for mercy. They did not understand mercy. They understood only power. Their empire stretched across half the galaxy. Other species whispered their name in fear. They took what they wanted. They killed who they wanted, and no one could stop them. So when their long-range sensors detected strange signals coming from a small blue planet in an unremarkable solar system, the High Council did not worry. They barely cared. A junior officer had decoded the signals and found primitive broadcast transmissions. Images of creatures with soft skin and weak bodies. Machines that rolled on rubber wheels. Weapons that used chemical explosions. The High Council laughed. "Another primitive world," said Counselor Morn. "Category 2 at best, divided governments, no space defense. They still burn dead plants for energy." "Should we send a full fleet?" asked another counselor. "A waste of resources. Send Admiral with 600 ships. Let the new commanders practice. This world will fall before their sun sets twice." Admiral was old and tired. He had conquered 37 worlds himself. He had watched species beg and cry and die. It no longer excited him. This mission was supposed to be his last before retirement. A simple job, an easy harvest. His fleet traveled through folded space and arrived in the solar system on a quiet morning. Earth hung below them like a blue and green jewel. Looked at it through his viewing screen and felt nothing. "Begin the broadcast," he ordered. Every device on Earth that could receive a signal suddenly showed the same image. Televisions flickered. Phones buzzed. Computer screens changed. Even old radios crackled with a translated voice. Billions of humans stopped what they were doing and listened. "People of this world," the message said, "I am Admiral of the Dominion of your planet now belongs to us. You have one rotation of your world to surrender completely. Lay down all weapons. Present your leaders for processing. Resistance will result in extinction. This is not a negotiation. This is your only warning." The transmission ended. The screens went dark. For a moment, the entire planet was silent. Then the chaos began. Governments called emergency meetings. The United Nations gathered in panic. World leaders shouted at each other through video calls. Military commanders scrambled their forces, only to realize their jets could not reach orbit. Their missiles could not target ships that hung beyond the atmosphere. Their armies could not fight an enemy in the sky. Religious leaders declared the end times. Some people fell to their knees and prayed. Others ran to stores and fought over food and water. Highways became parking lots as millions tried to flee cities they thought would be targets. News channels showed the alien ships as tiny dots against the stars. Experts came on television and said there was no hope. Scientists calculated the enemy's technology was thousands of years ahead. Generals admitted their weapons were useless. The world had one day to live, and everyone knew it. But not everyone panicked. In a bunker beneath the mountains of Colorado, a group of generals and scientists sat around a metal table. They did not cry. They did not pray. They were already making plans. "We cannot match their technology," said General, a woman with gray hair and cold eyes. "But we do not need to match it. We need to survive long enough to learn it." "And how do we do that?" asked a scientist. "We make them bleed for every inch of ground. We make this invasion so costly that they question whether we are worth the trouble. And while they are bleeding, we study, we adapt, we find their weaknesses." In a basement in Moscow, a different group was meeting. These were men and women who had spent their careers preparing for nuclear war with each other. They had built weapons designed to end human civilization. Now, they looked at those weapons with new eyes. "The missiles were built to hit cities," said one officer. "But we can reprogram them. We can aim them up instead of across." "Will they reach orbit?" "Some of them, enough of them." In Beijing, in London, in New Delhi, in secret facilities around the world, the same conversations were happening. Humanity was not unified in government. It was not unified in language or culture or belief. But in this moment, facing extinction, something strange happened. The old enemies stopped fighting each other. The Americans shared their satellite data with the Russians. The Chinese sent their missile codes to the Europeans. Countries that had pointed nuclear weapons at each other for decades now pointed them at the sky together. This was not peace. This was not friendship. This was something more basic and more powerful. This was survival instinct, the same instinct that had helped humans crawl out of caves and spread across their world. The same instinct that had driven them through ice ages and plagues and countless wars against each other. Humans were good at many things, but they were best at one thing above all others. They were very, very good at violence. They did not know this. How could they? Their scans showed only the technology, the buildings, the vehicles, the weapons. They saw a species that had never left its own planet, a species still fighting itself over patches of ground and imaginary lines on maps. They did not see what lived beneath the surface. They did not understand what 300,000 years of constant warfare had created. They looked at humanity and saw weakness. They were about to learn how wrong they were. As the deadline approached, the people of Earth stopped panicking. The crying faded. The prayers ended. Something else took its place, something quiet and cold and very, very patient. In cities around the world, ordinary people began to prepare. They did not prepare to surrender. They did not prepare to die on their knees. They prepared to fight. Farmers looked at their equipment and saw weapons. Engineers looked at their buildings and saw traps. Soldiers looked at their primitive guns and smiled because they knew something the aliens did not. Technology wins battles, but will wins wars. And humanity had enough will to burn the galaxy down. Above the planet, Admiral watched the deadline expire and gave the order to begin landing operations. He expected the usual scene: white flags, crying leaders, surrendering masses. He did not know that he had just made the worst mistake in the history of his species. The harvest had come to Earth. Earth was about to harvest back. The first soldiers landed outside Chicago on a cold morning. There were 10,000 of them in the first wave. They wore black armor that could stop bullets. They carried plasma rifles that could melt steel. They had conquered 100 worlds and never lost a battle. They marched toward the city in perfect lines. Their commanders expected to find humans waiting with white flags and tears. They expected surrender ceremonies and begging. They expected what every other species had given them. The city was empty. The streets were silent. Cars sat abandoned with their doors open. Buildings stood dark and quiet. No people, no flags, no welcome. Commander stopped his battalion and looked around. Something felt wrong. His soldiers had thermal sensors in their helmets, but they showed nothing. No heat signatures, no movement. "They have fled," said one of his officers. "Cowards like all primitive species." Was not so sure. He had studied the human broadcasts during the journey. He had seen their history. These creatures had spent their entire existence killing each other. They had built weapons to destroy their own cities. They had fought wars that killed millions of their own kind over ideas and beliefs. Cowards did not do that. "Advance with caution," he ordered. "Full sensor sweep, watch for." The building next to him exploded. The blast killed 40 soldiers instantly. Before the survivors could react, gunfire erupted from every direction. Windows that had looked empty suddenly showed gun barrels. Sewers that had seemed abandoned now held soldiers. Rooftops that had appeared clear now rained down bullets and grenades. The armor was strong, but the humans had learned something in the hours before the landing. They had captured footage of the alien soldiers. They had studied the armor. They had found the weak points, the joints, the neck seals, the vision ports. Soldiers began to fall. Commander shouted orders, but his communications were jammed. The humans had learned about their frequencies too. His soldiers fired their plasma rifles at the buildings, melting walls and shattering windows, but the humans were already moving. They fired and ran. They attacked and disappeared. They refused to stand still and fight like proper warriors. It took 3 hours to secure 6 city blocks. They lost 200 soldiers. They found only 11 human bodies. And those 11 humans had been smiling when they died. The reports from other landing zones were the same. New York, London, Tokyo, Moscow, Beijing, every city told the same story. Empty streets that turned into death traps, enemies that appeared from nowhere and vanished like ghosts, primitive weapons that somehow found every weakness in advanced armor. Admiral received the reports on his flagship and felt something he had not felt in decades. He felt doubt. "They are using guerrilla tactics," his tactical officer explained. They refuse direct combat, they strike and retreat, they use the terrain against us. Then burn the terrain, ordered, level the cities. The orbital bombardment began at noon. Plasma beams fell from the sky like the anger of gods. 12 major cities burned. Millions of humans died in minutes. Buildings that had stood for centuries turned to ash. The sky itself seemed to catch fire. Watched the destruction and nodded. This was how they handled resistance. Overwhelming force, complete destruction, no mercy. But when his ground commanders reported in, their voices were shaking. Admiral, the attacks have increased. Human resistance is growing. That is impossible. We destroyed their cities. They are showing the destruction to their own people. They are using it to recruit more fighters. Every bombing creates 10 more enemies. Did not understand. When the destroyed cities' other species surrendered, they gave up. They accepted defeat, but these humans were doing the opposite. They were getting angrier. They were fighting harder. On the ground, the true horror was becoming clear to the soldiers. Humans did not fight like other species. They did not follow rules. They did not care about honor or proper combat. They used tricks and traps and lies. They pretended to surrender, then detonated bombs hidden under their clothes. They dressed as civilians, then pulled out weapons. They attacked supply lines, medical stations, communication centers. Nothing was safe. No one could be trusted. Every human was a potential enemy. A patrol found a farm outside Paris. An old man stood in the field, hands raised in surrender. He was crying. He looked weak and harmless. When the soldiers approached, the old man pressed a button. The entire field exploded. The farmer had spent 2 days burying in his own property. He died with a smile on his face. In Brazil, a group of children led soldiers into what looked like a safe building. Inside, the floors had been covered with a chemical mixture that ate through armor. The soldiers melted from the feet up. The children had already escaped through tunnels. In Japan, engineers had turned subway systems into kill zones. Trains filled with explosives ran on automated tracks. Tunnels collapsed on pursuing soldiers. The darkness itself became a weapon. They had conquered species that had better technology. They had defeated empires with vast armies. They had broken worlds that should have been impossible to break. But they had never faced anything like humanity. These creatures did not fight to win. They fought to hurt. They measured victory not in territory captured, but in enemies killed. They would burn their own cities before letting them have them. They would die laughing if it meant taking one more alien with them. Soldiers began to break, not physically, mentally. They could not sleep without nightmares. They saw enemies in every shadow. Some refused to leave their bases. Others shot at their own allies, convinced that shape-shifters had infiltrated their ranks. The humans had no shape-shifters. They were just very, very good at making their enemies afraid. After 6 weeks, Admiral requested reinforcements. His message to the High Council was not confident. It was not proud. For the first time in his career, it was desperate. These creatures are not like the others. They do not fear death. They welcome it if they can take us with them. Their entire species is built for war. Every man, woman, and child is a soldier. I need more troops. I need more ships. I need to burn this entire planet to ash because anything less will not stop them. The High Council read the message and felt something they had not felt in 3,000 years. They felt uncertain. On Earth, the resistance continued. The humans knew they were losing. They knew the aliens had more ships, more soldiers, more power, but they did not stop fighting. They were waiting, preparing, planning. Because humanity had one more card to play. A card they had built to destroy themselves, a card that would change everything. The thought they were fighting a primitive species. They were about to discover they were fighting the most dangerous creature the galaxy had ever produced. Deep beneath the Swiss Alps, there was a bunker that did not officially exist. No map showed it. No government admitted to building it. But it was real, and inside it, the surviving leaders of Earth had gathered to make the most important decision in human history. The room was cold and gray. Concrete walls surrounded a metal table covered with screens and documents. Around the table sat presidents and generals, scientists and spies. They represented different countries that had been enemies for generations. Now they were allies, united by something stronger than politics. They were united by hate. General stood at the head of the table. Her face was tired. She had not slept in 4 days, but her eyes were sharp and her voice was steady. "The ground war is failing," she said. "We have killed 30,000 of their soldiers, but they have millions more. Their ships can burn our cities from orbit whenever they want. If we continue like this, we will be extinct within 6 months." No one argued. They all knew she was right. "But we have one advantage," continued. "One thing they did not expect, one thing they cannot defend against." She pressed a button and the screens around the room lit up with images. Missiles, submarines, underground silos, weapons that every person in the room knew very well. "For 70 years, we have prepared to destroy ourselves. We built enough nuclear weapons to end human civilization 10 times over. We pointed them at each other. We lived in fear of the day someone would push the button." She looked around the table. Russian generals sat next to American commanders. Chinese officers stood beside European ministers. All of them had spent their careers preparing to kill each other. Today, we point them at the sky instead. The plan was called the Prometheus Protocol. It was insane. It was desperate. It was their only chance. They had defenses against energy weapons. Their shields could stop plasma beams and laser cannons. Their point defense systems could shoot down smart missiles guided by advanced computers. But nuclear weapons were not smart. They were simple, brutal, primitive. They had never needed to defend against them because no species still used such crude technology. That was their mistake. Over the next 3 weeks, every nuclear submarine on Earth was modified. Every missile silo was, every warhead was enhanced with the deadliest materials humanity had created. Cobalt, plutonium, enriched uranium, weapons designed to kill not just the target but everything around it for decades. They watched from orbit and saw none of this. They were focused on the ground war, on hunting resistance fighters, on crushing the last pockets of rebellion. They thought the submarines were primitive underwater transports. They thought the silos were abandoned. They did not understand that humans had spent generations preparing for the end of the world. While the weapons were prepared, the humans began the second part of the plan: deception. Surviving television stations started broadcasting surrender negotiations. World leaders appeared on screens, crying, begging for mercy. They offered complete submission. They promised to hand over their populations. They said anything they wanted to hear. Admiral watched these broadcasts and felt relief. Finally, these creatures were breaking. The bombardments had worked. The invasion was succeeding. He sent a message to the High Council. "The humans are surrendering. I am recalling half the orbital fleet to begin processing operations. The harvest will proceed as planned." 300 ships left orbit to prepare transport containers. 300 ships remained, spread thin across the sky. The trap was set. On a Tuesday morning, exactly 47 days after the first invasion, 18 nuclear submarines surfaced simultaneously across Earth's oceans. Atlantic, Pacific, Indian, Mediterranean. They rose like metal whales, their missile doors already opening. In hidden silos across 6 continents, launch codes were entered. In bomber planes that had been hiding in mountain caves, pilots started their engines. And in the bunker beneath the Alps, General looked at her screen and gave the order that would change history. Launch. 2,000 missiles rose into the sky. They detected them immediately. Alarms screamed across every ship. Point defense systems activated. Targeting computers tried to lock on. But there were too many missiles. They were too fast. They were coming from everywhere at once. And they did not have computers to jam or guidance systems to confuse. They were just metal tubes full of fire and death aimed straight up. The first nuclear weapon detonated against the hull of a cruiser. The explosion was visible from Earth's surface, a second sun blooming in the morning sky. The ship's shields held for almost 3 seconds before collapsing. The cruiser broke apart into burning pieces that fell toward the planet below. Then came the second explosion, the third, the 10th, the 100th. The sky filled with fire. Ships that had conquered worlds died screaming, torn apart by weapons that humans had built to kill each other. Point defense systems overloaded. Shields collapsed under the radiation. Reactors breached and added their own explosions to the chaos. In 3 minutes, 147 warships were destroyed. Admiral watched from his flagship at the edge of the formation. His face had gone pale. His hands were shaking. He had seen battles before. He had watched ships die, but never like this. Never so many, never so fast. "Retreat," he ordered. All ships retreat, get out of range, get out of. A nuclear warhead, modified with a cobalt shell and enhanced with every horror human science could create, detonated 50 meters from his flagship's shield generator. The shield died. A second warhead followed half a second later. The Admiral's flagship lost its entire port side. The bridge decompressed. Officers were sucked into space. Himself survived only because his personal shield activated in time. He floated in the wreckage of his command center, surrounded by the bodies of his staff, and watched Earth through a cracked viewport. The blue planet hung peacefully below as if nothing had happened. But everything had changed. On the ground, the soldiers received the news of the fleet's destruction. They tried to retreat to their landing ships. They ran through cities they thought they had conquered, racing toward extraction points. They found death waiting for them. Every landing zone had been rigged with explosives. Every evacuation route had been turned into a kill zone. Human soldiers who had been hiding for weeks emerged from sewers and basements, armed with captured alien weapons and human rage. The ground force had numbered 200,000 soldiers. By the end of the day, 6,000 remained. Most of those surrendered. The ones who did not were hunted through streets and forests and mountains until none were left. In the bunker beneath the Alps, General watched the reports come in. Ships destroyed, soldiers killed, the invasion broken. She did not smile, she did not celebrate. She knew this was not victory, this was survival. They would send more ships, more soldiers, this was only the beginning. But for the first time since the invasion began, humanity had hope. They had fought back, they had hurt the enemy, they had proven that Earth was not a harvest. Earth was a fortress. And humanity was just getting started. They had made many mistakes. They had underestimated human courage. They had ignored human creativity. They had laughed at human weapons. But their greatest mistake was this: they had brought their technology to Earth. In the ruins of the invasion, humans found treasures beyond imagination. Crashed ships with engines that could fold space. Weapons that fired beams of pure energy. Armor that could stop bullets. Communication devices that worked across star systems. Medical equipment that could heal wounds in minutes. And humans learned fast, very fast. Scientists who had spent their lives studying physics suddenly had working examples of faster-than-light travel. Engineers who had dreamed of space colonies now held blueprints for ships that could actually build them. Military commanders who had planned wars with guns and tanks now designed strategies for battles among the stars. Within 6 weeks, the first human laboratory had successfully activated an engine. Within 3 months, humans had built their own version. It was not as elegant as the original. It was bigger, louder, and used twice as much power. But it worked. And humans did not just copy, they improved. They had built their weapons for precision, clean kills, efficient destruction. Humans looked at these weapons and asked a different question: how can we make them hurt more? Plasma rifles became plasma cannons. Energy shields became energy rams. Ship engines became ship weapons, designed to accelerate vessels to ramming speed. Every piece of alien technology was twisted into something darker, something meaner, something more human. The first human warship was built in a shipyard in Norway. It was named the UES Retribution. There was no ceremony, no speeches, just work. The ship was ugly. It looked like a metal fist wrapped in stolen armor. Gun barrels stuck out at odd angles. Missile pods covered its surface like metal warts. At its center was a weapon that no had ever imagined, capable of firing tungsten rods at 3% of the speed of light. They used energy weapons because they were clean and precise. Humans built a gun that could put a metal bar through a planet. General, now Admiral, took command of the small fleet, 15 ships total. Each one crewed by volunteers who had lost family in the invasion. Each one armed with weapons designed by people who had watched their cities burn. They were not soldiers, they were hunters. Admiral had retreated to the edge of the solar system with his remaining 312 ships. His flagship had been repaired, but the damage was still visible. Great scars marked the hull where human nuclear weapons had torn it apart. He had sent desperate messages to the High Council, begging for reinforcements. The messages spoke of unexpected resistance and temporary setbacks. He did not tell them the truth. He did not say that primitive creatures with crude weapons had broken the greatest invasion force in history. He was afraid, for the first time in his long career, was afraid. He told himself it was over. The humans had no fleet. They had no way to reach him. He just needed to wait for reinforcements, and then he would burn their planet until nothing remained but ash and memory. Then his sensors detected something impossible. 15 ships emerged from folded space near Jupiter. They were ugly, they were crude, they were human. Stared at his screens. This could not be real. These creatures had been trapped on their planet 6 months ago. They had fought with chemical explosives and projectile weapons. How could they have ships? How could they have faster-than-light travel? The answer came in the form of a transmission. A human face appeared on his screen, a woman with gray hair and cold eyes. "Admiral," she said, "my name is Admiral of the United Earthship Retribution. You came to our world, you burned our cities, you killed our children. We would like to discuss this with you, face to face." The transmission ended. Had 300 ships, the humans had 15. The numbers were clear, the outcome should be obvious. But the Admiral had learned something about humans, something that made his blood cold. They did not care about numbers. The Battle of the Jovian Belt began at 600 Earth time. The fleet formed a defensive formation, shields overlapping, weapons ready. They had superior numbers and superior firepower. They should win easily. The human ships charged directly at the center of the formation. No tactics, no strategy, no attempt to outmaneuver or outthink, just a straight line toward the enemy, weapons firing, shields burning. The first ship died before it could fire a single shot. The Retributions punched through its shields, through its armor, through its reactor. The ship exploded in a ball of plasma and debris. The human ships did not slow down, they did not celebrate, they kept firing. Commanders screamed orders, their ships returned fire, human shields failed, human hulls cracked, human crew members died at their stations. And the human ships kept coming. They had always won through superior technology and overwhelming force. They expected enemies to retreat when hurt, to surrender when beaten. They did not understand an enemy that pushed forward as it died. A human frigate, its engines destroyed and its crew mostly dead, used its last power to accelerate toward a cruiser. The collision destroyed both ships. The 5 humans still alive on the frigate had aimed it manually, steering their own coffin into the enemy. Another human ship, burning and broken, crashed into the formation and detonated its entire ammunition storage. The explosion took out 3 enemy vessels. The battle lasted 4 hours. At the end, the human fleet had been reduced to 6 ships. All 6 were damaged, 3 could barely move. But they had lost 240 ships. The survivors were scattered, broken, fleeing toward open space. Admiral's flagship was among the survivors, barely. His ship had taken 17 direct hits, half his crew was dead, his weapons were destroyed, his shields were gone. He tried to run. 3 human ships, the Retribution among them, pursued him for 6 days. Their own ships were falling apart. Their crews were exhausted and wounded. They had every reason to stop, to rest, to claim victory. They did not stop. On the 6th day, the Retribution caught the flagship near the orbit of Saturn. It's fired one final shot. The projectile passed through the flagship's engines, crippling it forever. Admiral led the boarding party personally. Her soldiers moved through the broken ship, killing the few who resisted, capturing the rest. They found the Admiral on his ruined bridge, surrounded by dead officers. He was waiting for them. His weapon was on the floor, his hands were raised. "I surrender," he said. "I offer myself as prisoner, the honor, the rules of." Shot him. The plasma bolt hit him in the chest. He fell backward, eyes wide with shock. His mouth moved, but no words came out. "Earth does not accept surrenders," said. "Not from you, not from your species, not ever." She watched him die. Then she turned to her communications officer. "Send a message to the, use their own systems. Make sure they hear every word." The message was recorded on the bridge of the ruined flagship, surrounded by dead officers. Admiral spoke directly into the camera. "Your invasion force is destroyed. Your admiral is dead. Earth still stands, and we are coming, not for conquest, not for territory. We are coming because you need to learn something that the galaxy needs to learn. Earth remembers, Earth does not forgive, and Earth does not forget." She paused. Her cold eyes seemed to look through the screen, through space itself, directly at whoever would receive this message. "Start running," The transmission ended. They received it 3 weeks later. By then, humanity had already built 30 more ships. The message from the human admiral reached Prime on a day of celebration. The High Council was gathered in the Grand Chamber discussing which worlds to harvest next. They were confident. They were powerful. They ruled half the galaxy. Then the transmission played. The Council watched in silence as a human female stood on the bridge of Admiral's flagship, surrounded by corpses. They watched as she spoke words that no species had ever dared to speak to them. They watched as she promised to come for them. And then they felt something new, something they had not felt in 3,000 years. They felt fear. The response was immediate. Every warship was recalled. 4,000 vessels, the largest fleet in galactic history, gathered around the defense platforms were activated. Shields were raised. The entire planet became a fortress. Warnings were sent to every vassal species, every conquered world, every listening post in space. A new enemy had appeared, a dangerous enemy, an enemy that needed to be destroyed. The galaxy listened, and the galaxy watched. 18 months passed. On Prime, the population waited in fear. Soldiers stood at their posts, staring at empty space, expecting attack at any moment. Children were taught to hide at the first sign of human ships. The name human became a curse word, a nightmare, a monster used to scare the young. The High Council argued constantly. Some wanted to send the fleet to Earth to finish what had started. Others said it was too dangerous, that they should wait, that they should build more ships. They did not know that humanity was not waiting. In shipyards across Earth, new vessels were being built. Better vessels, faster vessels, vessels designed with one purpose, destruction. Human engineers had taken technology and twisted it into something the galaxy had never seen. Weapons that could crack planets, engines that could cross star systems in hours, armor that could survive direct hits from plasma cannons. And the crews were volunteers, men and women who had lost everything in the invasion. They trained without rest. They studied without sleep. They prepared for a war that might kill them all. None of them cared. Admiral was no longer in command. She had died in a training accident, her ship destroyed by an engine failure. But before she died, she had chosen her replacement. Captain James, a man who had watched his entire family burn when Beijing was destroyed. Did not smile, he did not laugh, he did not give inspiring speeches, he simply prepared. When the fleet was ready, 42 ships in total, gathered his commanders for a final briefing. The room was quiet. Everyone knew what was coming. "We are going to Prime," said. "We are going to destroy their government, their military, and their ability to threaten anyone ever again. We are not going for territory. We are not going for resources. We are going for one reason only." He paused and looked at each face in the room. Revenge. No one argued. No one asked questions. They simply nodded and returned to their ships. The human fleet left Earth on a quiet morning, almost exactly 2 years after the invasion had begun. They crossed the galaxy through folded space, following maps they had taken from captured computers. They traveled in silence, conserving power, avoiding detection. 23 days later, they arrived at Prime. 4,000 warships waited for them, the largest fleet ever assembled, enough firepower to destroy 100 worlds. Against them stood 42 human vessels. The commanders laughed when they saw the numbers. They had heard the stories. They had seen the recordings. But surely these humans understood mathematics. Surely they knew they could not win. Captain opened communications. His face appeared on every screen, calm and cold and utterly without mercy. "People of," he said, 2 years ago you came to our world, you killed 17 million of our people, you burned our cities, you tried to make us slaves." He paused. "Today we return the favor." The Battle of Prime began at dawn local time. The human ships did not form defensive positions. They did not wait for the enemy to attack. They charged directly into the heart of the fleet. And they used weapons they had never imagined. The first volley came from the flagship, the UES. A single projectile, accelerated to a fraction of light speed, crossed the gap between fleets in seconds. It hit the largest command ship and kept going, punching through shields, through armor, through the entire vessel, and out the other side. The ship exploded. Debris killed 2 more vessels nearby. Then the missiles launched, thousands of them. each one carrying a payload of nuclear fire wrapped in shield technology designed to get close before detonating. Point defense systems tried to stop them, but there were too many. They detonated against hulls, inside hangar bays, beside engines. Ships began to die. They fought back, they had numbers, they had firepower. They destroyed human ships, they celebrated each kill. But the humans did not stop. Every destroyed vessel had already launched its missiles. Crippled ships aimed themselves at enemy formations and accelerated to ramming speed. Dying crews fired their weapons until their last breath. The battle lasted 11 hours. When it ended, the human fleet had been reduced to 9 ships. All 9 were damaged, most could barely move. But the defense fleet was gone. 4,000 warships, reduced to scattered debris floating in the void. And then Captain gave the final order. The 9 surviving ships turned toward Prime. The planet hung below them, green and blue, home to 80 billion souls. Cities covered its surface. Farms fed its people. Factories built its weapons. Did not give speeches. He did not offer terms. He simply opened fire. The weapons humanity had built were not designed for conquest. They were designed for extinction. Orbital bombardment platforms, reverse-engineered and enhanced, rained fire on military bases and government buildings. Kinetic impactors struck industrial zones with the force of nuclear weapons. Communications networks were destroyed in minutes. The humans did not land. They did not occupy. They simply erased. When the last weapon was fired, Prime was still there. The planet still existed, but everything on its surface that could threaten Earth was gone. The government, the military, the factories, the spaceports, 80 billion reduced to scattered survivors hiding in the ruins. Not conquered, not enslaved. Answered. Captain looked at the burning world below and felt nothing. No satisfaction, no joy, just emptiness. This was not victory, this was payment, a debt collected in blood and fire. He turned to his communications officer. Broadcast on all frequencies, every species, every world, every station in the galaxy. The message went out at the speed of light, spreading across star systems, reaching millions of listening posts, billions of receivers. Every species in the known galaxy heard the same words. This is Captain James of the United Earthship. The Dominion came to our world and tried to destroy us. They failed. Today, we destroyed them instead. Let this serve as a message to every species in the galaxy. He paused. His eyes, cold and hard, seemed to look through the camera at everyone watching. Earth wants only peace. Earth wants only to be left alone. We have no desire for empire. We have no interest in conquest. But we will never forget what they did, and we will never forgive. Another pause. If you come for us, we will end you. Not defeat you, not conquer you, end you. We are humanity. We are very good at violence. We would rather not prove this again, but we will if we must. The transmission ended. Across the galaxy, communications networks went silent. For 3 days, no one spoke. No transmissions, no messages, no signals of any kind. Millions of species, thousands of civilizations, all of them quiet, all of them thinking about what they had just seen. A primitive species from a small blue planet had destroyed the most powerful empire in the galaxy. They had done it with captured technology and pure rage, and they had promised to do it again if anyone bothered them. When the transmissions finally resumed, something had changed. A new word spread through the galaxy, a word that had no translation in most languages but which every species now understood. Human. It meant do not touch, it meant leave alone, it meant danger beyond measure. 1,000 years later, Earth would become the center of a peaceful federation. Humans would be known for art and science and medicine. They would help rebuild worlds and heal old wounds. But in every species, in every culture, in every corner of the galaxy, parents would still tell their children the same warning, the same story, the same truth. Be good, be kind, be peaceful, or the humans will come. And the galaxy remembered, the galaxy stayed silent. And Earth was never invaded again.